2, give me 5, 4, 3, 2. We are recording, guys. Hey, welcome to the National Fireman's Journal. I'm Bobby Hullender. I've got two good friends with me. I got Brent Hullender and David Rhodes, and they work for a major metropolitan fire department somewhere in Georgia, which is a state in the great state of the United States that has dental care that not everybody takes advantage of, apparently. So, yeah, it's a great Smoky Mountain Gap. So anyway, we were visiting earlier, and I wanted to have the guys come on. David and I and Brent have been working together for over 15 years now on FDIC, and David and Brent help run the HOT. David runs logistics, and Brent runs communications and transportation. And I couldn't do it without them. And inside of all that, we've got to be great friends. And I've also got to watch them run a smoke divers program for the great state of Georgia, and probably the most elegant and comprehensive training program that I've ever seen in terms of the skill sets that you need, particularly for applied tactics. Probably not so much on the grand tactics side, but definitely on the applied tactics side. There's nothing that comes close for mental conditioning, physical conditioning, skill set, muscle memory, and these guys have done just an amazing job. Everything from addressing rhabdo to resiliency, and then just comprehensive skill set. So without going on forever, I'll bring the guys in and just talk a little bit about your careers and how long you've been on the job, and what led you into divers, and what divers is up to, and where it's going. So who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Brent.
To keep it somewhat brief, but it kind of ties into smoke divers. In high school, I started out as an explorer with the Dalton Fire Department. At the time, Scott Millsap was the training officer, and he was running the smoke diver program as well. And we took a field trip to smoke divers my senior year in high school. And I said, boys, I'm going to be there one day. And everybody kind of laughed at me and was like, yeah, sure. And 3 years to the day, October 94, I went to the Georgia Smoke Diver program. It's actually where I met David. He was our PT instructor then. And graduated Georgia number 593. Worked at Dalton, then went to the larger department in 98, and have been there since then. I'm currently a captain of a very busy engine company and the operations chief for the smoke diver program.
So you went to divers young, man.
Very young. I was 20.
Is he the youngest diver, David?
Oh, no.
No,
I think I was 19 when I went. But we've had some 18-year-olds, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And then
it was back when it was hard. We have it's an inside joke there. We have a saying.
That was coming.
We have a saying when somebody comes back to help us teach. No matter what you see here behind the scenes, just remember there was never a smoke diver class as hard as the one you went through, and there'll never be another one.
It's in their mind. Perception equals reality. It doesn't always equal the truth, but everyone believes their class was the hardest. So yes, I went at a very young age. And then about 15 years later, I went to Mississippi's program. Doug Stevenson and I went through it in 2009 to do a little more of a challenge at a little bit older age in life. And it definitely was different at 35 versus 20. You just don't recover as well. Now I'm still somewhat the youngster of our FDIC group at 46, although I think Jacob might be a couple years younger. But the years are starting to catch up.
Wow. So at 36, how do you think I would do at smoke divers?
Oh, I thought you were 38, Bobby.
You would have done fine at 36. That means you would have been in Brent's class. we might not actually get through this.
We might not.
This
So
might turn into laughing.
that's exactly right. So David, your story real quick on, go ahead. And not even quick, just your story real quick into dive, and then we'll talk about divers particularly.
Started in the fire service in 1985, a little small suburb department right outside of Atlanta, just one station, about 25 guys. Had a few volunteers left over from the days when they were volunteer. And we had about like 25 paid guys, and went to smoke divers my second year there, or actually the end of my first year. So in 86, and real small department, very big on training, a lot of state instructors. And it was sort of like, if you worked for that department, you were going to smoke divers. I think probably 80% of the department had been through sometime between 79 and 85 there. And again, it was Scott Millsap's first class as being the lead instructor in charge. His personality was just unreal. Just, such a, I don't even know how to describe it. He was just magnetic, just the way he projected. And, he had that tough guy, look, but he wouldn't accept anything but absolute perfect 100% all the time. And I just sort of fell in love with that whole concept there, and immediately went back to help teach, and which is you have to go through in order to be an instructor, of course. So I went back and taught the last class that was at the old State Academy that was in Marietta, Georgia. And then my second class teaching, we actually delivered the program in Washington State to, I think, right around 30 firefighters out there in Washington State at the Washington State Fire Academy. And so we went out there with 13 instructors. We have, Brent, somewhere between 80 and 100 or so now every day. But we went out there with 13 and put on a class for them. And then came back, and I've been to everyone since. We did have a little bit of a shutdown from 95 to 2005. Just some state politics and stuff shut the class down. And then Brent and I brought it back. We were in the process of bringing it back before Scott passed away, but he actually left the class. He'd already trademarked everything and decided he was going to split off from the State Academy so we could do things a little bit more on our own. And so he left that part of it to Brent, and then Brent said, man, we got to make this thing happen. So we did. In the meantime, over those years, our department consolidated with the county from Conyers to Rockdale. So I was with them for about a year and a half, and then I left and went to the undisclosed major metropolitan department. That's why, if you notice, these two guys have a nice background. I am always in an undisclosed location. That way, any of the internet trollers and stuff, nobody can actually pinpoint my position, because I may be a wanted man in 7 galaxies. But anyway, that was it. We brought the program back in 2005, and we haven't slowed down. We've expanded to Indiana and started their program. And then just recently, last month, or actually this month, at the beginning of the month, we're in Tulsa there, close to you, and kicked off the Oklahoma version. We got people that have been to our class from somewhere, I think last count was 34 states, something like that. And some states have multiple folks that have been, and planted a few seeds most recently up in Idaho. So it's looking pretty promising there, but it's a long process. You really have to be dedicated to it. You have to spend a lot of time getting your folks through our program, and then coming back to intern and teach, because it's not a normal class that you just come and learn a few drills or whatever. We are deep into the psychological part of it. It couldn't be done with a handful of instructors. I mean, we have a full medical staff, doctors, folks watching your nutrition, your hydration, constantly
So,
monitoring you, and then a
so
full logistics crew and all
let's
that.
just back it up a little bit, because probably a lot of people are wondering what the heck smoke divers really are. So, um, and I'll tell you one thing. I don't let me forget, because I want to ask this question later on, a little bit later on, get an answer later on maybe. Both of you went in pretty young, which is interesting, because most of the divers I know, the guys that and gals that I know that have gone through divers, they're not newer firefighters. They're more experienced firefighters. So, and I want to keep that in the back of your mind after you tell people a little bit of the history, whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage. Obviously, an advantage because you're probably in a little bit better physical shape in most cases, not necessarily all cases. And I don't know how much of an edge that gives you, but the skill set stuff is going to be interesting too when we get into that area of it. So, who was the first smoke diver class? Was it Georgia? Or where was the first smoke divers?
So
We need Jack on here to answer that. Ours came from Florida, but I think actually there was one in New Jersey, may have been one of the first ones.
but
I'll see if I can ask him.
there's nothing in Jersey now. But
That's true.
the,
There isn't.
the history of ours.
Everyone's left.
So Bobby, you remember Cortez Lawrence?
Sure do. Yeah.
Cortez passed away a couple years ago, but Cortez took a group from Georgia and went through the Florida program. And that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on is no one's just making hard stuff up and having someone else do it. Everyone that is an instructor in teaching has been through it. So Cortez took a group of about 10 to 12 guys to Florida between, I think, 75 and 77. And then 1978 was the first class in Georgia.
Wow.
And then we went from 78 to 95. And then as David was talking about, we had the break. We were shut down from 95 to 2005 and then started back up in October of 2005.
So, we've mentioned a couple of people here. Cortez Lawrence was a decorated Marine. He worked at the National Fire Academy, and I believe he had the Navy Cross. I know he had some pretty significant decorations from his career. He was a no nonsense guy and a great guy, and that's kind of the caliber of the people that have always been. Everyone I've met who's associated with divers is that kind of guy. They're very accomplished, but they're very kind of private and humble, and they're really, but they're into the job, and they're into taking care of one another. And that was, and Scott was the same way. Scott Millsap, and God bless him, he's up on a hill outside of Dalton now, and we lost him to cancer. What was that? Probably 2000?
September 2002.
2002.
September 23rd, 2002.
He was a force.
So smoke divers started out, it was safety and survival before anybody talked about firefighter safety and survival. And, the key thing to it, and David could probably elaborate on this a little more, is that it was about the breathing apparatus. Fire departments started getting breathing apparatus. And granted, Bobby, you remember this. I was about to start kindergarten. Well, on a side note here, I've actually got a kid on the back of my engine that I went to smoke divers before he was born. So now I'm getting the old guy jokes. But we were just sticking these breathing apparatus in the fire department, and nobody knew how to use them.
Oh, we didn't.
And guys were getting themselves in trouble with them. So that was kind of the foundation of it. It was focused around the breathing apparatus.
Well, because real divers learned some hard lessons. The first divers, if you look back at the Navy's history with diving, the what do they call it? The nitrogen toxicity, the bends, and all that. So from air packs coming into the fire service, ergo the name smoke divers. So the hard lessons from that the divers learned, people started to create the smoke divers. So You get an answer, David, or you just getting back
No.
on? No.
Is my audio working?
Yeah. So Dave, I was just filling in a little bit about, the history of it and how it was safety and survival, before its time, and how, initially it was focused around the breathing apparatus.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely, that old newfangled device came in that was going to kill everybody because you were going to get into the fire too deep. And we hear that every time we get something new, like thermal imager or better gear or whatever. So they were afraid that anything man-made was going to fail. So we had to have survival techniques and all the way to breathing off the cylinder if you needed to, as long as there was air. That was one of the old sayings, definitely when I went through. If you had air in your cylinder, no matter if everything else failed, if you had air in that cylinder, you could get yourself out. And that's what we did, in the class. That was one of the drills. So
Wow.
we've taken that and kept it pretty, we've kept pretty true to the core. There is a lot of breathing apparatus, a lot of search, but we've really upped the mental aspect, and also leadership. Servant leadership is a big part of it, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the total package firefighter that's intelligent, makes good decisions, a lot of decision making work in there. We say, depending on if you're in a busy department on a busy company or not, but we probably give you in 6 days anywhere from 4 to 6 years worth of decision making if you were on a busy company. So a lot of these guys coming from smaller departments that may, get 10, 15 fires a year, sometimes less than that or whatever. They have to make critical decisions so many times in a day that experience is just invaluable. And Bobby, we've had these conversations about situational awareness, in that you can't really teach somebody to have situational awareness, but if you give them a lot of experiences, then their situational awareness increases. You can teach them about what it is, but they actually have to have experiences and something to pull from before they can make good decisions. And we would actually like to even take it further. We just sort of run out of time in 6 days. But that's a huge part of it, is that whole resiliency, mental toughness. And then we drive home into them servant leadership, because we want them to go back to their departments and become the go-to guy for whatever it is. Whether somebody needs spec written, SOP written, or they need somebody to just knock down the wall to get in, to get somebody out. We want them to be the full package. And we're starting to see a lot of our guys that have been through the program become fire chiefs and company officers, all over the country. So
give me a lowdown as to what the program is as you have it now. What? So I hear about smoke divers. I say, well, I'd like to challenge. I'm a pretty good firefighter. I'm interested. What would be in store for me if, say, I was signed up for the next smoke diver class?
You remember that old cadence, yellow birdie with a yellow bill
Yellow
landed
bill
on my windowsill?
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Come on in and
sound off.
Yeah, we it's very regimented and very much like a military boot camp in the mornings with the PT and stuff. I mean, it is just insane PT. Start off at 7 in the morning, which means that you need to be, in the parking lot probably about 6:15, 6:20. You got to turn in your urine test that we check every day for hydration levels. You got to bunker out, get your PT formation, make sure you got everything squared away for the day. PT instructors will run them through anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes of calisthenic stuff in gear. And as soon as they finish that, they go straight to I believe we're at 18 or 19 station obstacle course, which is all job related functions. And you do that on air. Usually takes somewhere around 35 to 40 minutes to complete. You get about a 10 minute, well, depending on the PT instructor, anywhere from 6 minutes and 20 seconds, whatever he feels like. Everything's always an odd number to try to remember, to 10 minutes. And you change into your PT gear like your running gear, and then they go on a 3-mile run in the mountains. And when they get back from that is actually when you start the day as far as the drills and stuff. And so the goal of the PT is not to get you in shape. Obviously, you need to be in as good a shape as a professional athlete when you get there. And the goal is to wear you out. And so you can't recreate what we do in a 1-day training setting or even a 3 or 4 day training setting. You got to have that constant wear down for about 3 consecutive days. As your body starts to break down, then your decision making gets worse and worse and worse. And we compare it to anybody that's working out. If you want to build a muscle up, you got to tear it down and let it build back up. Same with the mind. We try to get you so physically exhausted, but you're still having to make these decisions and stay focused. And, you know, we get the 1,000-yard stare and stuff, but we're constantly evaluating each of the students and putting them in a lot of bad type positions. Like they could be trapped, they could be lost, they could be on, you know, either side of a mayday, or they could just be searching a building that's hot as hell with a fire underneath them, and the engine company, you know, can't make access to them right away. Maybe they're doing a vent inner search or whatever it is. And we make it as realistic as we can with smoke and fire for most of the stuff. Even in our bailouts, we teach them the bailouts, but then we have a mask up and do it actually in smoke so that they have the, you know, restricted vision, muted sounds and all that kind of stuff. So as realistic as possible, but under strict supervision. For every one student that's in the building, there's 3 sets of eyes on them for pretty much everything.
Wow. So how many days long is the training?
Of course, it's 6 days. It's Sunday till Friday.
6 days.
Okay, Sunday.
But then
Sunday.
Really, if you extend that out, it's probably about 6 months of you preparing, at least 6 months of you preparing, which kind of, I don't know if you guys got in it while I was off, but your age versus experience thing.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective because it kind of depends on the individual. But what I see is that, you know, the 18 to, I don't know, 20, 21-year-old that's brand new to the fire service and comes, you know, with a year on or whatever. It is an endurance thing for them. Their basic skills are usually weak. They can't search worth a damn. And we find that with even some of the veteran folks. Search is horrible for most of the candidates that come. And we've actually had to make some modifications and teach some search stuff earlier in the class before we get to that day. And it's because everybody's being taught in the academy front door, right hand, left hand, and it just doesn't work in the real world like that.
40 by 40 concrete building.
Yep, no furniture, nothing. So, but it seems like, I mean, the experience is good for them because for a lot of them, it's the toughest thing they've ever had to do. So it is endurance, it's mental toughness, and they're learning that part of it. But I think the 4 to 5 year and a little more, those guys that come, they get more out of it. Wouldn't you say, Brent?
Yeah,
they got some context.
Well, that's one of the things that we recommend is it's ideal if you're that 3 to 5, no more than about a 7-year guy. You've kind of, you know, got your foundation, you've got good fundamentals, and then you come to it. Now, getting some of the older guys, part of it happened when, because we had the 10-year break for a little while, we actually had a backlog of guys that had wanted to go, but the program was shut down. So for probably the first 5 to 10 years we were back, we actually saw the average age was probably somewhere between 35 and 40 with some outliers in the mid to high 40s.
Smell like icy hot every morning.
And, you know, some of those guys, the ones that made it, they really struggled. However, I think they probably got more out of it than anyone.
Yeah, so I think, you know, it's interesting because it's a double-edged sword. If you're the younger guy, the PT and the physical side of it might be more endurable. But if you're an older guy, you're thinking, okay, I can use this here. I got this here. Now I've got this here. And you're getting all that experience. You're thinking, well, I've got enough drills now to deal with my company for the next 3 years.
And then, another problem with the older guys is, just bad luck and catching an injury. Your body's already got some miles on it, so knees and backs go out sometimes. And so, we tell someone you're better to go in your 30s if possible.
Yeah, I've heard those older guys break down like that. I don't know what that's like yet.
You can still ride the longboard.
That's it.
And then every now and then we meet a freak of nature. I think one of the oldest guys that ever came through, I can't think of his name right now, but he was in his early 50s.
Gary Meyer.
It hurt him. Was that it?
Gary Meyer, Peachtree City.
Peachtree City. So this guy, he comes and he struggled. Everybody struggles, but he struggled, but he wasn't bad. He just was kind of quiet and did his thing and stayed in his zone, and he graduated, and then I think he graduated on Friday and then flew to LA and participated in some bicycle ride from LA to Miami over the next 20 or 30 days. And he does all kinds of just insane stuff still to this day. And he came through years ago. I don't know, at least five years ago, if not longer.
Probably 10.
And he's still doing it. He's got to be getting close to 60 if he's not 60. So there's some freaks of nature out there. But I'd say most of the folks that are coming now are mid-20s, mid-30s or so, somewhere in there. But it's not. It's all on you. It's whatever you prepare for. The older guys can do it. They just got to know that it's a little bit rough. Brian Lloyd was the training chief in Tulsa when he came through, and how was he? He was,
I would say, probably 45.
He's 45, 46.
Yeah. So it's been a couple years ago, and he trained. He physically he did real well. What was funny that was a very big eye opener to him was where he struggled was just the basic skills, because it had been so long since of being the guy searching or being the guy throwing the ladder or whatever. And he really realized that, all skills are perishable. And all of us that get up, once we make chief, like what I made battalion chief 15 years ago or whatever. And, my ladder throwing and search skills and all that are nothing of what they were 15 years ago. And if you come into that class at that time in your career or whatever, you have to realize that. And so you might need to brush up on, forcing doors and crawling a lot.
Speaking of Lloyd, here's an interesting thing. You talk about the age and everything, Bobby. Lloyd brought, I think, a total of 8 guys when he came, because he called David up and said, hey, we want to start a smoke diver program. And David said, all right, you need to come to ours first. And at first, I think Brian was like, well, I wasn't necessarily planning on going through again.
And he had been to Mississippi's already. So
he had been to Mississippi about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But he brought, some phenomenal guys with him. Some of them much younger, much better physical specimens than Lloyd. But at the end of the week, Lloyd was the only guy left. And now most of those guys came back to one of the next 2 or 3 classes, and they made it. And a phenomenal group of guys out of Oklahoma. But that first group, the old guy was the only one that made it.
So I ran into a couple of those guys in an airport, and I see these kids in the Tulsa airport wearing smoke diver gear. And I walk up to them. I said, "You're divers?" They said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Where are you from?" "Oklahoma." I said, "You're really divers, huh?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Who's David Rhodes?" "Smoke Daddy." I said, "Oh, you're really divers." I thought maybe they were posers. I said, "I'm just checking." Because, you see people walking around, wearing crap.
It's tough to get our stuff on the black market. We keep it pretty controlled.
Yeah, but there's those guys, and
Counterfeiters.
they were great guys. They were all ramped up about you coming up and doing the class. Great. And I took the picture. I sent it to David. I said, "Here I'm with a couple of divers," and they were just thrilled. They were really
Now, a very important point. Brent, I don't know if you covered this, but this is truly a labor of love. Nobody in our organization gets paid. It's a strictly give back. Um, we say it's our philanthropy. We do a lot of things in the fire service and stuff, and we taught, as young firefighters for the state for free for years and stuff, and we get paid to do a lot of training and stuff outside of smoke divers, but nobody from the top down gets paid to do smoke divers. And in fact, we took 80 instructors out to Tulsa to start their program off, and everybody paid their own way to go. And Tulsa, Brian and the Oklahoma guys got sponsorships for the hotel rooms. So hotel rooms and lunch while we were on site was it. We figured up, between the airfare, taking time off for work and all that, it cost each one of our guys somewhere between $1,500, $1,700
wow.
to go and do that class. And 80 people did that.
Wow.
So it wouldn't work without that mentality. If it was a paid structure, it would fall apart, and you wouldn't have as many. There's no way you could afford to pay 80 people to come and help teach your class for 24. What we have 24 in Oklahoma.
Started with 24, graduated 12.
Now, since we're more established, we start with anywhere between 40 and 46 sometimes. But we can handle that volume with it being a new facility and all that. We kept it pretty low. Same with Indiana. They just had their biggest class. They started with 25, I think, and they graduated like 19 or somewhere in there. So they finally kind of made it over that hump. They were just taking like 12 students each time.
So what are the upcoming diver? I know everything's kind of in the ether right now, but are there any diver classes scheduled for like 2021?
So our normal schedule is that we do typically the last week of February and then the second week of November for the classes in Georgia. And then about every 3 years, we take a week off for the Leadership Academy. And I know you were down, you actually keynoted for us, I believe 2015. And we were actually due a Leadership Academy in 2018. But we were really making the big push of trying to get ready for Oklahoma, get more Oklahoma guys through. So we kind of put it on the side. So if the restrictions lift first week of August, we will have our Leadership Academy. And that's just going to be, our in-house guys. And we can deal with the heat for what we're doing during the Leadership Academy. The next class that will be open will be class 59, and it starts November, I believe it's 15th, whatever that Sunday is of this fall. Hopefully we'll be back to business. And then class 60 will be sometime in February of 2021.
Wow.
Then you'll probably have an Oklahoma class in March, and I'm not sure Indy typically does theirs in October. We'll just have to see how their scheduling works.
And Indy got permission. Hopefully it stays, everything's kind of moving around, but they're going to be building a new facility. They're going to be sticking the shovels in the ground and all that good stuff. And hopefully they'll be able to utilize that going forward. They got such a great training ethic out there in Indy. It's amazing. It's nice to see Georgia, Indy, and Oklahoma putting it together. That's kind of nice because Oklahoma is the epicenter of fire service training, obviously.
What's the largest inland port?
And Catoosa, Oklahoma, the furthest inland port.
Furthest inland port.
Furthest inland port in the continental United States. There's a further inland port in China. It's physically, it's a longer haul in China, but who the hell want to be in China? So, bunch of communist idiots.
We're really proud of those guys. They made a heck of a commitment, and I don't think I made this point earlier, but it took from the time the first Indy, it was Wayne Township, Matt Stewart came. He was our first out-of-stater from when the program came back. It used to just be all in-state, and I think Bob Sanborn was from Kentucky, came through the old before the shutdown.
But I think he may have been Georgia when he went through.
He may have
moved to Kentucky.
But Matt, we opened it up, to out-of-staters, so Matt could come. And in his class was also an Ohio guy. And it took about six or 7 years before they actually had their first class from the time Matt went through. And that, we say you get 15 people through our program. That's a good start for an anchor of an instructor corps. We'll bring our guys out to help you kick off. But the important part is you can't just come through our program. You got to come back 6 classes or so, which is 3 years worth of classes to intern so that you can understand how to run it, because it's realistic. There's real fires. There's a lot of things that could go wrong if you're not managing the medical side of it, the nutrition, the hydration. It can get sideways quick. That's why a lot of folks, there's a lot of programs that have had injuries and some deaths, and we want to be the model for all the programs. Georgia, Indy, and Oklahoma are all connected. No other smoke diver program is associated with our program, and there's no lock on the name smoke diver. It's Georgia smoke diver, Indiana smoke diver, Oklahoma smoke diver. So any of the other programs, and some of them are very good. There are some similar programs that don't have smoke diver in the title because maybe in their state somebody got hurt or something. But it's real important to manage the instructor cadre. We're run by a full Type 3 incident management team with, again, the medical, the nutrition, all that stuff. And it's dangerous to be it would be dangerous in the wrong hands. That's why we're so guarded. You're not going to call us up and say, hey, man, can you send us your outlines for smoke divers? We'd like to start a smoke diver program. Because obviously with that mentality of our own folks, mine was the hardest class. So I'm going to come back and make sure the next class is as hard as mine. And the thing is, it's designed to be hard. You don't have to make it harder. And we know exactly where we are on what day and what we're doing evolution wise. And it's a huge responsibility. It is definitely, if you ever want to see true risk management, not the quote,
risk aversion.
I don't know what to say, risk aversion or whatever. But if you want to see true risk management where there is actually high risk stuff going on that is managed to a point where it lowers that to a level that it's actually safe to operate in, then, any chief that's out there is more than welcome to give us a call and come watch what we do. And we haven't had one yet. We've probably had 15, 20 chiefs from around the country come and see what we're doing over the last few years. And not one has left saying, there's no way I would send anybody to this program. As a matter of fact, they're like, how many can I send you next class?
So is there a cost associated, David, with attending smoke divers?
Let Brent knows all those numbers.
Okay, so yes, it is. One thing, and the biggest thing that we've tried to do is limit the guys that are giving back to the program, their out-of-pocket expense. It still costs everyone money to come, but we at least want to cover their lodging and
that's only been within the last 5-6 years.
Yes. Speaking of the incident management team, we got the food unit established. We're feeding everyone that's on site. So we're feeding, 80 to 100 instructors plus anywhere from 20 to 45 students. All of the logistics that goes into the class, sheetrock, OSB, all the materials that go into it. It's amazing how much the expense is.
Oh, I'm well aware of how fast that adds up.
And just the hotel bill alone is insane. But with that said, the Georgia guys are going for $500, which is
Wow.
unbelievably cheap, and that
For
includes
6 days.
their lodging.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're for those that like, oh, those guys are trying to get rich, trying to make money. Well, no, we're pretty much scraping pennies by the end of the week to get everything done. But the Georgia guys go for $500, and the out-of-state guys, it's a little bit more. Again, there's a lot of guys, and it's kind of helping shore up the other stuff. It's $9.95 for an out-of-state person. It does cover a couple extra nights lodging because they have to come in earlier to complete the qualification test.
Night.
And on the back end and stuff. But even at that, 6 days, over 60 hours of training, lodging, and half your meals for $995 is dirt cheap.
Oh yeah, that's a great price.
Going back, talking about the training centers for just a second, I'll get on a little tangent about that. Historically, the Georgia program had always been at the Georgia Fire Academy. It was in Marietta when David went through. And then in 86, 87, Georgia built a large public safety training center in Forsyth, and we were there. That's where I went through. It's where we started the class back. Around 2009, their burn building was condemned just for 30 years of use, and they were tearing it down. And so can't hold the class without the burn building. So City of Dalton stepped up. And their chief then, Bruce Satterfield, was a smoke diver. Another great friend of ours, Deputy Chief Gary Baggett, who actually passed away a couple years back. He was a smoke diver, and they opened their doors. So we came to Dalton, did several classes there. It was great. Went back to the Fire Academy for a little while, and then our group was just kind of like, you know what? Dalton loves us, takes care of us. We wanted to do it there. And so I got to give a huge shout out to Dalton Fire Department, Chief Todd Pangle. Actually, he and I graduated high school together. He fully supports us. And
Well, he graduated.
Well, I made it through. And
Got
then,
the equivalency.
And then another one of our guys, Mike Russell, Deputy Chief of Dalton, who is also our logistics chief. He
was in my smoke diver class.
He probably puts in as many or more hours than me and David do with the program. He is constantly working, prepping, getting ready for the class, and then still cleaning up our mess after it's over with. So it's been a great partnership, and it's worked out very well in Dalton.
Hey, you got to tell him what his greatest logistical feat of all times was. The day before you got married.
Yeah. So, Mike's one of those guys, just salt of the earth country guy. He's actually more like my big brother than anything. And something had happened. I was getting married, and maybe the preacher I had fell through. So Friday afternoon before the Saturday wedding, I called Mike up and I said, by the way, I need you to get me a preacher for tomorrow. And next thing you know, he's got the fire department chaplain there ready to go. Wow. So he is a true logistics man.
There you go. Always travel with a preacher.
One of the interesting things, it's like, we teach in the class adaptability and, read the situation and turn it into something good, no matter what you got. Of course, the Georgia Fire Academy is just an ungodly, massive facility with huge towers and burned buildings and other structures and all this stuff. But there's legislation that was passed when that was built that actually says you cannot charge a Georgia firefighter to take a class at that facility. It's in the legislation. So every class that you take there is free of charge to you or your department. If you live, I think it's 60 miles. If you live 60 miles away, you're eligible for housing. But if you're within 60 miles, then they won't cover your housing. And they have dormitory style housing and stuff there too. It's a phenomenal facility and all. But since we were not allowed to charge, like those first few classes, they actually gave us a little contract, little MOU, and I don't remember, was it like $1,500?
$1,000
Brent,
for the first one.
$1,000 for the first class, and like then it went up to $1,500, $2,000, and Brent and I were paying for the rest of the stuff. If we needed to go to Home Depot for sheetrock or whatever, it was on one of our credit cards.
That's just like FDIC.
And we can say that. We could say that because I don't think either one of our wives watched the fire engineering webcast.
My bosses don't either, so I ain't worried.
They had no clue about that part of it. But so it's kind of been a blessing in disguise in that we were able to really grow the program and support our instructors more by actually not being a state class, by being private and charging the students. We're able to get the lodging covered, and the guys still lose money by taking off from work and their food and all that stuff. But
I'll tell you that the two programs that I love, you guys and of course my firefighter Cancer Support Network, nobody gets paid at either one of those deals. Nobody. And I've never known two organizations that have done more for the fire service, honestly done more in terms of esprit de corps and wellness than those two organizations. One on the skills side and giving people a level of excellence to shoot for, and the other one taking care of people when they get sick. And that's just the truth. And I agree with David. If somebody started making money, you'd destroy it. It would
absolutely.
Destroy it. And that doesn't mean that the places that make money can't do well.
No.
But there are certain organizations that once it gets running that way, leave it alone. And there's Nassim Taleb talks about a thing, and it's called the Lindy principle. And it came from a group of actors, really, who used to meet in this cheesecake place, this restaurant in New York City called Lindy's. They claim they have the best cheesecake in New York City. Everybody claims they have the best cheesecake in New York City. But anyway, these actors back in the 30s, whatever, noticed that if a play ran for, 2 years, it would run for 4 years. If it ran for 4 years, it would run for 8 years. So they were right. They'd be able to pinpoint it, say, nope, as long as they didn't screw with it, right? As long as the playwrights didn't change anything, or as long as it didn't, it didn't try to make Romeo and Juliet in the modern day or any of that kind of nonsense, as long as they kept it straight, as long as you didn't screw with it, it would keep running. And so you look at things like The King and I, that's still on Broadway. I mean, it'll be there forever because no one's going to screw with it. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. No one's ever going to screw with it. Be there forever. You screw with it, it dives. And I think smoke divers, you nailed it. You got to run it the way it's been running, and all your affiliates got to adopt that philosophy, or they're not smoke divers. And it's the same thing with the Cancer Support Network. I think if anybody started making money, it'd be over. And that's not to denigrate making money. I know a lot of great organizations that make money, that do amazing work, fantastic training, unbelievable training, blue card.
But if we were paying instructors, I mean, let's say a minimum of $15-20 an hour, which is typical instructor pay for a lot of places, you're looking at having to charge the students, $5,000 to $6,000 for those 6 days.
And people don't understand that. We do that at FDIC, and we're paying people about really closer to almost $40 an hour to instruct. And, we put those classes out there, and that company's losing money. We make it on the backside with the vendors, but you guys know we run FDIC. That program, that hot program, just loses money. It just hemorrhages money, and it's the workshops and it's the and the vendor area that prop up that program. And most of the guys that come and do it, that doesn't cover your week away from work, or we do lodging and travel, but every instructor at FDIC is pretty much the same kind of caliber on the hands-on there. Yeah. Most of them, and not that I choose sobriety, that's on me, but most of the guys drink away that pay before they leave, and some of them eat it.
Yep. And And you made a great point. I mean, there's a lot of great guys out there that, you have to pay to go to their classes, and we are not against that at all.
Not
I
at
don't
all.
want to even imply that. You want to learn forcible entry, or you want to learn search or fire attack.
Right.
We have a different type of program. We're teaching mental toughness and how to overcome adversity, and we're using fire drills to do that. We're also teaching servant leadership, and this is a deep dive inside yourself, and we tell you that the first day.
So I've watched you two guys for a long time, and you don't get embarrassed about this, but it's almost a spiritual thing with you guys. You know what I mean? It's almost
Yeah.
People have likened us to a cult, but no,
we fully admit it. We are a cult, but we're a cult for good.
Right. It's a passion. I mean, it's a passionate group of guys.
No, so on that a little bit, the guys, we always talk about, you get down in the trenches at your fire department, and you can go around every fire department in the nation and the kitchen table, and you're hearing the same complaints, and it kind of gets you down. So once every 6 months, guys get to be with a group of people that, and I do say gals, you can give a shout out to Melissa and a couple other girls out there that are part of us, but I use the term generically, but it's like a recharge.
Right.
The week there, you're working, you're busting your ass, but you're giving back, and everyone there is focused on the mission. Now, talking about, charging for classes, David and I do other training that we charge for, and there's no problem with that. But the model that Smoke Divers has become, it takes, we could do it probably with 50 guys if we had to, but we would have to scale some things back. But we've kind of got the system now that we need 80 people there every day. And one of the big things is the students aren't setting up anything. They're not cleaning up anything. The instructors are doing all that. So it is focused solely on every minute that the student has is about their learning. And we're doing everything else in the background. And so the way the model is set up, you need $100,000 to run the class. And like you said, it wouldn't work if you start messing with it.
Well, and the other thing,
most of these guys are paying their own way. There's a few departments that pay them, and there's a few that have like buybacks. If they pay their own way, and if they make it, then they'll reimburse them.
well, and I can speak for the three of us, and not for all the instructors I don't know, but a lot of the stuff that we do for free, and a lot of the reasons why we're firefighters, is because we're trying to get back in good with God for our wild and mischievous youth.
There may be some truth to that.
There may be some truth to that, because not too many of us were choir boys, or so. And I'm just teasing, but so just to bring it full circle and just to close it out for folks. Smoke Divers has a website, Georgia Smoke Divers, right?
Yeah, just georgiasmokediver.com.
And you can hook them up with Indiana or Oklahoma, because I don't think the Oklahoma website's up yet.
So if it's not, it's going to be up very soon. But there are links to Indiana and Oklahoma on our site, as well as contact for myself and David. For anybody that wants to come out of state or even in state as well, sometime probably late June to early July now, because we want to see what's happening on the social distancing restrictions. But we'll start the registration process. And for the Georgia guys, we do the open qualification test where they're actually competing for their spots. So, and the reason we do that, at one point there was a rule from the Fire Academy was first come, first serve, 2 per department. Well, a small department could get their whole department through in 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then, a large metropolitan department, it's not going to get a battalion through in 5 years. So we put it out there. It's objective-based physical training or physical stations, anything from pull-ups to a pike pole pull to an equipment hoist to a dummy drag. And you're scored on how well you do on that. And so the guys that score the best get in. But I always tell people that if you truly want to be in the class, to keep training, because someone always drops out, and you may get the call literally the week before the class. And those guys that have the heart and were there and wanted to be and were ready, we'll call them up 3 or 4 days before the class starts. And they're like, yes, sir, I'm ready. And, sometimes they don't make it. And then sometimes those guys, those are the ones that can dig deep. They've got the heart, and they truly wanted it. They weren't the strongest person. They didn't score the highest on the test, but they never lost sight of it. So it's good. So anyway, class will be in November, then another one in February.
So when is the Medicare eligible class? So I can use my benefits to. That'd be funny. That'd be fun. Smoke divers for 65 and up. And I'll guarantee you, guys and gals would show.
No doubt.
We might surprise the shit out of you.
That's the Leadership Academy, because we do PT with all the instructors, old and new. The Leadership Academy, it's pretty fun.
I'll bet. I'll go on.
We've even had a few injuries in the Leadership Academy PT. Harvey Kreider.
I'll go on the run with you any day. The rest of it I don't know about. But
Bobby, I can't keep up with you.
Yeah. You'll always have the longboard story. That's a classic. That's classic.
That truly is.
He's going to kill himself. Well, maybe not. Well, listen, I can't thank you guys enough. It's always great just to get to hang out with you. And I don't know what's going to happen with the show. I know, for this year, everything's up in the air. We're watching everything that's happening around the country. Seems like we're kind of in the beginning of the middle. So, we'll see. Sure, I'm proud of the way the fire service has been handling themselves. Been proud of the way the government's been handling themselves. Really across the board. I think the Americans have stood up, and kind of makes you proud to be an American when stuff like this. There was a guy named Hornfisher, who I absolutely adore, James Hornfisher, who was writing about World War II, and a naval historian. And he said the Japanese underestimated the courage and resolve of America when her back's against the wall. You know what I mean? And you're seeing Americans with backs against the wall. And we keep talking about the first responders, and I'll just close out with this for me. And I get it. The doctors, the nurses, the firefighters. I'm on a little volunteer fire department here. But I'll tell you what, the real first responders, I think, are the folks in the grocery stores and the hardware stores that are still open. Because if we get a call, we know the person's sick and we got PPE and such. But, my wife and I, we go down to Walmart, and I'm over 65. I wasn't kidding around. And they let us come in early, and those people treat us like gold. And those folks in there, they don't know who's coming through those doors, whether they're sick or not. And they don't have the PPE. And they're still showing up, and they're stocking those shelves. And so those folks that are, just on behalf of the fire service, if you're watching this and you're a volunteer or whatever, man, thank you for those grocery clerks and the folks that show up at the Walmarts and the hardware stores. And because if they weren't there right now, we'd be in real trouble. And they are. So, we get to take a lot of kudos and a lot of bows, and I get it, our work's dangerous, but these folks didn't sign up for anything dangerous, and they're still showing up because they're Americans.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
I'm sure in freaking other places they ain't, but I don't care. America first, baby. America first.
And you know what? There could be a lot of good come out of this. Just look at the some of the forced changes, like the work from home and stuff. And I think we're going to realize, hey, 50% of the workforce can work from home and take traffic off the roads, so we don't have to build more infrastructure just to keep up with what do we say in the fire service? It's the way we've always done it. You got to report at 8 and get off at 5. Some of these delivery things have accelerated, and the food industry. Who would have thought the like the Uber Eats and all those things. I mean, they are like booming right now because none of the restaurants
It's
are
gonna
open.
give rise to new industries. I think it's gonna
Yeah.
affect education, because I think people are gonna look at, wow, we can do a lot of education online for people, and so it's gonna be interesting. So I hope everybody out there is safe and well, and hopefully, if you're hearing this months later, it turns out well for us all. And God bless the folks we've lost so far. It's horribly tragic, and hopefully we don't lose too many more. But sure, I'm proud of the way the fire service and law enforcement, the military, and even our government. I got to say it. I'm no fan of politicians, but most of them have done a pretty damn good job. So
Yep.
thank you for that. Well, thank you, fellas. Thank you, smoke divers. And if you're interested, go to smokedivers.com there on the www and check it out.
We usually would never have time to do this at this time of year, so this was pretty cool.
Well, I'm grateful for you being on with me. This is the National Fireman's Journal, and thank you for joining with us, and we'll see you again soon on the National Fireman's Journal.